Welcome to Snooze with Sam. Scottish sleep stories, meditations, and as of tonight, reading stories to you by my mum's fire. Well, it's a first time for everything, and as I'm sure a few of you hopefully saw a couple of days ago, I put a post out just saying that I'm having software issues, to put it mildly, and it's now to the point where I can't do anything. So I'm trying to come up with a solution, but ultimately it's going to take time and potentially money. So rather than get too upset about it, because I had written a story for you this week, but I just wasn't able to do anything with it. So I thought, when life hands you lemons, squeeze them really hard. No, I came through today on my motorbike to come and see my mum, and I thought, while I was here, I might as well just light a wee fire, give us a wee cosy night together, and I'll just read something to you. Ultimately, doesn't really matter what, but I'm going to talk to you and read you little stories and facts about Scottish wildlife. I know a lot of you know how much I love the wilderness and animals. So I have a couple of books here all about both the wildlife of Scotland as well as garden birds. I've always been a bit of a bird spotter anyway, and I'm a complete through and through animal lover. So I hope you'll enjoy these as well. Now this is raw. I will be filming this and recording it and uploading it straight to you, so please bear in mind I may breathe, I might swallow, I might even cough, or I might have to take a break. That's the reality of recording stories that you do not necessarily hear in produced versions. I might also have to go and stoke the fire, so I'll do my best to stay out of the screen, but if you see me in my motorbike, socks and thermals, take it easy. Don't get too excited, but also don't judge me for wearing very casual clothing. Anyway, without further ado, when you're quite comfy and hopefully you're enjoying the fire, lie back, take a deep breath, and enjoy tonight's wee reading. Now, I think we will start with some garden birds. Might flick between a couple of these little books. See, the difficult thing for me is choosing where to start, because I've always been a massive fan of seabirds. Don't know why. I think just by living on an island and being surrounded by the ocean, seabirds, whether we were out on a boat or just fishing off the pier, were always present. So I found an early love with some of the more common ones, to be honest, things like razorbills, guillemots, birds that were still quite unique and novel to me. They weren't just plain old seagulls. Not that there's anything wrong with a seagull, but they always caught my interest. So I think, yes, I quite fancy starting with the gannet. So I'm going to turn to page 18. Hopefully I actually like hearing the sound of the pages turning. This is such an honest reading, it's quite refreshing. Okay, so the gannet. I think gannets are worldwide birds anyway. I just think that, but you obviously get a variety of different plumages and breeds. But gannets, at least in the Atlantic, are white birds with black wingtips. I did just sneeze, by the way. I'm not even going to hide the fact I did just sneeze. I wish I could edit that out, but you're getting the full bifter here. So, the gannet. Yes, it's a dazzling white, cigar-shaped bird, as is described here. It's perhaps exactly how I would describe it as well. It's got a 1.5 metre spread of black-tipped wings. And the gannet fishes by plummeting spectacularly from height, as much as 30 metres, from a height of 30 metres, to crash dive into a shoal of fish. In the autumn, the adults are accompanied by their blackish-grey juveniles and pied immature birds. In summer, nesting gannets mass in thousands on the flattish top of a skerry, or in serried rows on large drums of seaweed along the ledges of some great cliff face. Now we can concur with that, because if any of you have ever travelled to Edinburgh and looked out to sea from maybe the Leith side down by the water, kind of the north east of Edinburgh, you can look out to a place called Bass Rock. Now the closest point to Bass Rock is North Berwick on the mainland, but you can still get a good view of it from Edinburgh. Now Bass Rock is famous for its incredible concentration of seabirds. It is basically a lone, isolated, small stack of cliffs just out on its own in the middle of the water. But it is home to hundreds of thousands of seabirds in general, but gannets are probably the bulk of the population. It's always amazing to see, because the Bass Rock itself is completely covered with their droppings, obviously, as most seabird populated areas tend to be, totally whitewashed. Also, it's another fun memory. I'm never going to get through this book otherwise. But if you can hear a cat meowing, it's because there's a cat meowing outside. So I might let him in a moment, so you'll have to bear with me. But another fun memory of living on Skye was the view out to sea, because we were also right on the water there. But between us and the mainland of Mallaig, was the nearest village, was maybe a 2-mile stretch of water. Now this stretch of water was rife for wildlife in general, dolphins, porpoises, whales, but it was a seabird sanctuary because of the richness of the fish population. So naturally, thousands of gannets were constantly diving just out into the water, and I think that was the start of my kind of love affair with seabirds, because watching a gannet dive for the first time was quite a magical experience because, yeah, they do go from such height. But they very rarely get so close that you feel like you know them. It's not like a seagull where they're everywhere you look. Gannets still keep their distance from humans. So to see one actually fairly close always felt very special. And for the British Isles at least, they seem and look very exotic. Now, I'm going to take a very short break to stoke the fire for one, and potentially let the cat in. The cat has since disappeared, so he can come back when he's quite ready. Anyway, where were we? The next bird I think I'd like to tell you about is the fulmar. Now again, the fulmar's quite a common bird, I guess, globally. I've seen them certainly all over the planet in a variety of different countries. Most notably in Iceland, in fact, where they are effectively more common than the seagull. They can be quite easily confused with seagulls because they look quite similar, I guess. Greyish and white, yellow-beaked birds. Either way, this oceanic plankton-feeding petrel, however you want to pronounce it, now nests on cliffs and grassy slopes all around Scotland, and even on inland crags. Although resembling in a grey and white gull superficially, as I just said, yeah, they basically look like a gull. It's got straight, dark grey wings, alternately beating rapidly and then gliding and banking. It sweeps down to and up from the sea. Contrast with the angular and unusually black-tipped wings of gulls. The straight and grey ones of this look quite different when they're on the wing. They fly beautifully, to be honest. At close range, when a fulmar planes noiselessly along the edge of a cliff, it can be identified by its large, round, white head and tubular nostrils, apparently. It's classed as a medium to large bird on the scale of birds. Can't say I've ever passed comment on its tubular nostrils when I've spotted them out and about. But I obviously haven't been looking close enough. Next, I think let's talk about the cormorant. I do love a cormorant because, have you guessed, I love every bird. Cormorants are lovely because you can get very close to them, as you'll usually find them sunning themselves and beating their wings, usually on the shoreline, just drying off from either diving underneath the water or just catching the rays, as we all like to do. But these birds nest mainly on cliffs and skerries around Scotland, although some cormorants nest on rocks and even trees on inland lakes. I've never seen a cormorant in a tree, but I've obviously not seen them as often as these guys have who've written the book. In winter, they are common in estuaries and far inland up rivers. At sea, strings of cormorants may be seen gliding in unison en route for their roosting cliffs, or standing immobile for long periods on reefs or buoys with outstretched wings. The cormorant can be identified at all seasons by the white on its face and chin, and during the breeding season by a white thigh patch. Steady on. Immature birds are brownish and have white bellies. These are very large birds. Yes, well, it didn't really describe their physical complexion and plumage, so if you've never seen a cormorant, they are big black birds with kind of long tail feathers, webbed ducky feet as most seabirds are, and they tend to have a little crest on the top of their head with some wee cresty pointy up feathers, but more so than their kind of neighbouring shags. That is the name of a bird. I'm not being rude. And they've got a long kind of pointy beak which is curled at the end. They're very beautiful, especially when they fly, because when they fly over the water, at least, they can be very, very flat to the surface, basically just using that air pressure beneath their wing surface against the water to maintain loft, rather than to have to flap constantly to stay in the air. They do fly high, but when they're going longer distances, they move down much, much closer to sea level to effectively conserve energy. And it's incredible when you see them doing that, because you wonder how they miss the waves, because they're that close to the water surface. They're stunning birds. That was the cormorant. Oh yes, here we go. Now, I'm going to tell you about the grey heron, because I've got many heron friends, or have had many heron friends over the years. Where I used to live, on the south side of Glasgow, I'm just watching the cat outside chasing a mouse. Oh, for goodness sake. Leave it alone. That cat is a nightmare. It's only, I think, how old is it now? Maybe 18 months old. It's still a big kitten, but he's a very, very good hunter. He's an outdoors cat, but he's full of beans all the time. Never chills out, always just totally on it. And yeah, he's now chasing a mouse around the garden. Don't bring that in here. Either way, where were we? Yes, the grey heron. So yes, on the south side of Glasgow, where I used to live, every day when I walked in and out of town, I would cross over the Clyde River. And on this particular bridge between Gorbals and Salt Market, a very wide bridge with traffic going over it, but it was also part of a dam. And on the banks of this dam was a grey heron. Now, nothing special about herons. They are everywhere. They're as common as seagulls, to be honest. However, this grey heron was in the same spot every day. And it took me a while to notice that it was in the same spot every day, until maybe the fourth or fifth time that I'd seen it there. So I thought, right, okay, we've got a neighbouring heron. What shall we call it? Jerry. Let's call this heron Jerry. So this Jerry was there every single day, in the same spot, barely moving, if ever. And I thought, surely it does move. Surely it's not always there. It has to go and feed or fly about. But it took so long for there to be any day where it wasn't. I did wonder, crikey, is it living a really isolated, tiny little world of an existence? But one day Jerry wasn't there. So that confirmed that. But then I started to get concerned because it was maybe 2 weeks when Jerry wasn't there. And I know birds move and they migrate and they maybe just take up a new territory. However, something in my gut was just telling me something wasn't quite right. Long story short, 2 months passed and Jerry wasn't there. So I kind of feared the worst. Such is my cynical outlook sometimes. Wildlife is a kind of a cruel cycle sometimes. Regardless, I was over the moon because one day I was just crossing this bridge going to and from work as I normally do, and lo and behold, there was our pal Jerry. I was thrilled to see them. Don't know whether it was a boy or a girl. They were probably a girl, but I still like to call them Jerry. And the romance continued because for 4 years, and I wish I was exaggerating, for 4 years, Jerry was there. Yes, every now and again, they would go away for a couple of days, but every other time I would cross this bridge, there was this grey heron. And so I've just got a real affection for them. I don't really know why otherwise. I call them lurky turkeys because they just stand so damn still. Anyway, a tall, gaunt, grey bird with a long, thin, yellowish neck, black plumed head, and a long, dagger-shaped beak, which is found throughout Britain. These books are not written like novels, and I keep reading them as if they are, but it's just a sort of short, compacted sentences, so apologies. It is characteristically seen peering over the top of a reed bed, to be specific, or a bank, or poised motionless, like Jerry, with an S-shaped kink in its neck, waiting to make a lightning strike at an eel or flatty. think what that means is a flatfish. Its harsh, rasping watch or crank is unmistakable as it leaves its nesting colony in the treetops and flies away with a slow, even heavy flapping, head hunched into its shoulders and its long legs extended beyond its short, square tail. Very large. 90 centimeters is all it says. Bless you, Jerry. You're a heck of a guy or girl. Heck of a they. Right, let's give this fire another wee poke. I would like to see some flames and some crackling. Right, that's better, isn't it? Bit more fire, bit more flame, bit more crackle. Okay, so I just want to talk about one more bird before moving on to some different wildlife, I think. Because I saw in this the redwing, and there's a very interesting story about the redwing which I really holds special to me because it's so unique an experience that most people will probably never have a sight like this. So, first of all though, although it's sort of quite similar to a thrush in its size, so it's like a small to medium sized garden bird, speckly belly, with sort of blonde plumage on their breast at least, with a little red fleck on their otherwise brown wings and body. Beautiful little things, really delicate little birds. So the redwing, although a number of these thrushes are now nesting in the Scottish Highlands, they are predominantly winter visitors to Britain and fly over in immense numbers from Scandinavia, and this is exactly the little story I'm going to tell you in a moment. Redwings pass the winter ranging in flocks, often with field fares, over fields and over woodlands, and feeding on worms and berries. They can be distinguished from song thrushes by their prominent creamy eye stripes, bright russet flanks, and in flight by the russet under the wings. On a late winter morning, a flock may be heard warbling softly with sweet linnet-like notes, and that's another bird, a linnet, by the way, and liquid song thrush trills. An interesting description of this beautiful looking bird. Didn't really go into too much detail beyond just russety flanks. So the redwing was a bird that I hadn't really come across that often until I began working on the oil rigs offshore. And when I say offshore, I mean maybe about 50 to 60 miles just off the coast of Aberdeen initially, and then eventually I worked between Shetland and Norway. Either way, when I did work on a rig just off Aberdeen, I experienced something that I haven't experienced since, and I doubt I ever will. I was a young apprentice then, working on one of the lower decks of the rig, looking out to sea as I usually did when I was just filling time or wanted to go for a walk. But I remember looking north one day. This was, I think it was in October. Looking north and seeing a huge, long, dark, smoky line stretching from literally as far as I could see onto the horizon, kind of winding its way like a snake all the way past the rig that I was working on. And this smoky line, which looked like a cloud, were redwings. It was migrating redwings. And I really wish I was exaggerating, because it sounds so ridiculous to say that for 3 days, 3 entire days, this snaking, migrating train of birds flew continuously, night and day, from Scandinavia south into mainland Europe. I could not believe my eyes at the time, and all the other guys and girls I worked with on the rig. It was kind of commonplace to them. They'd seen it many times before. But I just thought it was absolutely incredible. And they would fly past the rig, because they would use rigs as almost resting places, because they're flying for hundreds of, if not thousands of miles without stopping, which is, again, unbelievable, isn't it? How can nature be that powerful? But it is. And after a day or so, I kind of went hunting in the nooks and the crannies of the below deck, at least, to find that there were, in fact, hundreds of redwings just resting and regaining strength. Although there's only so much strength they can regain on an oil rig where there's no food, so they were realistically just resting. Some would find themselves in a bit of trouble, obviously on the brink from exhaustion, and you could handle them because they were just that exhausted that they wouldn't struggle, but they would be in dangerous places in the middle of walkways, so we'd help them to safety and so on, and just try and shelter them a little bit. But it's just something I will never forget, to see that many. I can't even hazard a guess at just how many birds there were. Millions even. 3 days this continuous train of birds flew for. But it wasn't just the numbers, it was the fact that you could see where they came from on the horizon. And they would all fly together in groups. But because of that, it looked like a trail of smoke just drifting over the sea, snaking and winding as they followed each other, also being guided by the wind. It was phenomenal, it really was. We also had migrating eagles and owls on the rigs as well as swans. You know, and this is out in the middle of the water where you cannot see land. To see owls and even swans below deck on the surface of the sea, it was always fascinating, very strange. Fascinating times, it really was. Got some very fond memories of that. Okay, that was the Red Wing. I think we should look at a couple of wild land-dwelling animals now just before I bid you good night. I'm just going to look at the contents of this book. So we have hedgehogs, shrews, bats, hares and rabbits, squirrels, beavers, hamsters. Really? Hamsters? Probably, maybe not in the UK, but surely they are. Bears. No, okay, this is just a general wildlife book. Okay, let's go for something that definitely is in Scotland then. Rats and mice, dormice, porcupines. Doubt we'll get a porcupine up here. I think let's read about hedgehogs first. Who doesn't love a good hedgehog? Here we go, right. The northern hedgehog, which is the one that we do have here. There are 3 species of hedgehog found in Europe. These are the northern hedgehog, the Algerian or vagrant hedgehog, and the eastern hedgehog, very imaginatively named. The northern hedgehog is widespread and often common over most of Europe, except the more northerly parts of Scandinavia. That includes Finland and, as written here, the USSR. That dates the book. You'd swear Paul McCartney or Wings were writing these descriptions. It's also found on many islands and Eastern Europe, where it's replaced by the pale-throated eastern species. The Algerian hedgehog has a very restricted range in Europe and is only found on the Mediterranean coasts of Spain and France and the Balearics. It is also found in North Africa. They are found in a wide variety of mainly wooded habitats and are often common in suburban gardens. Hedgehogs grow up to about 25 centimeters long, with their tail largely concealed, and weigh between 800 grams to 1.4 kilos, depending on the time of year. Bless them, wee chubby things. 800 grams, oh, sounds so small. They're just the sweetest looking things, aren't they? Although unlikely to be confused with any other animals, these 3 species are very similar. But the Algerian hedgehog has lighter spines and longer legs than the northern hedgehog, and also a parting in the spines on its forehead. Hedgehogs are mainly active in the twilight and at night. They are often very noisy. That's true, actually. They do ruffle and scruffle and make little kind of piggy honking noises. And they can run and climb. Though the normal reaction on the onset of danger is to roll into a ball, erecting the spines at different angles to cover the underparts. Hedgehogs are mainly insectivorous. I'm guessing that means they mainly eat insects. They make nests of leaves and grasses, and anywhere between 2 and 9 pink, soft-spined young are born in the late spring or early summer. And there is sometimes a second litter. They hibernate in winter. There's your hedgehogs. By the way, have you ever seen a hedgehog run? I don't want to say Google it if you haven't, or YouTube it. However, if you haven't, it is absolutely hilarious. You wouldn't believe the length of a hedgehog's legs and the speed that they can reach. They're absolutely rapid. Right, let's find one last animal before I bid you good night. Here we go. I think I'm going to finish with the pine marten. Quite a common weasel type species here. Gorgeous, misunderstood animals because they are seen as pests to farmers mainly, and they are pests to farmers. But ultimately, the weasels don't know any better, do they? They're just trying to survive like the rest of the animal kingdom. The pine marten is widespread over the most of northern and central Europe, but absent from much of Spain and the southern Balkans. It occurs in Corsica, Sardinia, Sicily, and the British Isles. There you go. The beech and stone marten has a more southerly distribution, including Corfu, Crete, and the Rhodes. The holidaying marten, and it is certainly missing from the British Isles and Northern Europe, because they know better. If I was residing in Corfu or Crete, I certainly wouldn't be coming up here anytime soon. A program of conservation and reintroduction in the USSR has been carried out in whenever this was published, the 80s probably. And in the future of the sable, which is a species of marten, it might recolonize in parts of Europe. I wonder if it was successful. I'm not actually sure. Anyway, the pine marten, which is the marten of concern here is found mainly in coniferous or mixed woodland. The pine marten grows to a length of about 75 centimetres, of which the tail is about 1/3. The marten feeds on small animals. In spring it has 2 to 6 kittens, which is quite sweet. And they can sometimes be confused with polecats, which are a bit smaller and less agile. Now I remember the best time I ever saw a pine marten was a very strange one. I've seen them a few times. But on Skye, I was fishing down at the pier, maybe about a mile from where we lived. And I'd caught the fish and I was just going to go down some steps on the back side of the pier to go and deal with them before taking them home. So basically, yes, prepare the fish. And as I was going down these steps, there, sitting at the very bottom one, was a pine marten. I thought, goodness me, what on earth are you doing there? The forest is that way. The forest is not here. This is the sea. But he was happy to chill for a second, wasn't too bothered by me. But I thought, well, we could stay here all day, but I do need to prepare these fish. So I just moved a bit closer and a bit closer. And then the pine marten just jumped into the water and started swimming across the bay towards the beach, which was maybe about half a mile away. And I was like, who knew pine martens were good swimmers? Because it just wasn't bothered by the water at all. It probably had got there by swimming, to be fair. But that was about the closest encounter I've had with one without happening upon one on the road, which is how most people see the British wildlife, badgers, squirrels and so on. But I've always loved them, like every animal. It's just amazing to see them out in the wild doing their thing. And if they just so happen to cross paths with you, all the better. Right, I do hope you're asleep by now. But if not, I'm just going to leave you with the fire for a short while, just to lull you off to sleep. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. I know it'll be a bit rough around the edges and a bit noisy here and there, but it's just the way it is. But I really hope you've enjoyed yourself and that you found this nice and soothing. So hopefully next week I can bring you a real story. But for the time being, thank you again, and I hope you sleep well. Good night.